what is the solution to the equation 2x plus 3 to the 1/2 power minus 2 equals x? And we've got some options here. We've got 1, we've got -1, we've got -1 and 1 and no solution. And first of all, what we need to know is how to deal with that to the 1/2 power. And if you don't know how to do that, you need to go back to the previous lesson, because we talked about rational exponents in that lesson. But as I flip over here to my notebook paper, what happens is that we need to rewrite 2x plus 3 to the 1/2 power. And the way that we rewrite it is that the 2x plus 3, the base, becomes the radicand, the value that goes underneath the radical. The denominator of the fraction goes in the check mark part of the radical. It's called the index. However, because it's a 2, we don't need to write it. And then lastly, it's to the 1/2 power, so we could rewrite this to the first power, but I write it very lightly because we don't really need that as well. To the 1/2 power means that we're dealing with the square root. So maybe that's a little note that you want to make off to the side for yourself, is to the 1/2 power means that it's the square root. So now the rest of the problem is minus 2 equals x. Well, what we need to do is we need to isolate this square root. So we'll start by adding 2 to both sides. We need to get the square root by itself. So it's going to be the square root of 2x plus 3 equals x plus 2. Well, we want to figure out what does x equal, and we've got a square root in here, and the way that we're going to get rid of the square root is we're going to undo square rooting by its inverse operation, which is squaring. And square rooting and squaring cancel each other out, so we get 2x plus 3 equals x plus 2 squared. And I was going to skip a step, but I'll write it here. And oftentimes what happens when students make a mistake on this is they forget that squared means times itself. So when we rewrite this, this is 2x plus 3 equals x plus 2 times x plus 2. And that means that we're going to have to double distribute or FOIL, whichever your Algebra 1 teacher taught you. So we get 2x plus 3 equals x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4. And when we simplify a little bit more, we can combine these like terms, and we get x squared plus 4x plus 4. And eventually we're going to have to factor in this particular problem, so let's move the 2x over to the right side. And when we move that over, we get 3 equals x squared plus 2x plus 4. But we can also move the 3 over, and in fact we have to. When we solve by factoring or quadratic formula or even graphing, we want to have the equation set equal to 0. So now that we get to this point here, what we need to do is we need to split the middle, although the only factor of 1, so it's 1 times 1 is 1, so the only factors are 1 and 1. Everything is positive, so this is going to be x squared plus 1x plus 1x plus 1. Here's our grouping. And we get x times x plus 1. Over here, we factor out a 1, and we get x plus 1. So we've got an x plus 1 from each group. That's the same. And luckily enough, what's not the same is also an x plus 1. And what we want to do is we want to set each of these factors equal to 0, but when we set them equal to 0, it's going to give us the same value. X plus 1 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, and we get x equals -1. And then we want to be really, really careful here because we do need to check for an extraneous solution. And if you recall, an extraneous solution means that it looks like a perfectly good answer, but it may or may not work. And if you looked at the choices when I had the problem up on my iPad, one of the answers was no solution. But let's go over to Desmos here for a second and check this. So I just had to pause the video for a minute to pull up Desmos. But what we're going to do, we said that our answer to that problem was -1. So we're going to take that value of -1 and we're going to put it back into the original equation. So it was parentheses, and then I'm going to do 2 times -1 plus 3. And then you can't see my screen down here, but I do have this up here. Let me scoot it up here. I'm going to pick the A to the B button here after I go outside the parentheses. So I'm going to pick A to the B, and then I'm going to do 1 divided by 2. So there's that. Then arrow out of that, maybe, and then -2. Because that's what's on the left side of our equation. And what we want is we want this problem to equal -1, because on the other side of the equation it's an x, so it has to equal that. And because that ended up to be a true statement, then -1 is our solution to this problem.